And call this meeting to order. We're going to have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Thomason, do you want to do roll call?
President Reese, members of the board, please let the record show that we have 3 board members here tonight. Mrs. Amy Kaler and Mr. Rick Thornock were unable to make it tonight due to previous engagements.
Thank you. We'll go on to the approval of the agenda. I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Any questions or comments regarding the agenda?
And this is the time now? No. Okay.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. We'll go on to consent. I move that we approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Questions and comments on the consent?
Questions in reference to some of the funds that I see sitting in there. If you could kind of walk me through the process, because I see some large funds carried over from last year, and I'm just kind of curious why those weren't spent, and what the decision-making process is in reference to disbursement of these funds.
Mr. Holland, it's the student activity funds that we've had some discussion about. And I think Mr. Witovich's question is because this is for the July report, which should be their new fiscal year. No worries.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's, while you're pulling that up, I think the questions that have come up, which we've kind of had some discussion in the past, is Higley High School's bringing forward a balance of $113,000 in their student activity funds. Williamsfield High School's bringing forward $116,000 in their student activity funds. Cooley Middle School has $33,000 in student activity funds. I think it's, if I'm correct, I think it's the repetitive question as we get the student activity funds are not governed by the district. We don't use them. I think the continual question, though, is why is there so much carryover? If they're fundraising, what are they using those funds for?
President Reese, members of the board, yes, we have had that discussion before, and we've talked about working with the student activities clubs. That would be Justin, who's our financial analyst that works with them, and trying to get those balances down. Obviously, we are not doing a very good job because the numbers seem to keep growing. I will follow up on this tomorrow and see what information I can get. But I do know that they have continued to fundraise for each of the different activities. Some of the things that they've been fundraising for, they've raised more money than they needed for that particular expense. But I do know too that typically they've tried to leave money in those accounts for the incoming class.
So I guess my question is, who decides on the disbursement of the funds?
These student activities, the club sponsors and the students themselves.
So at an elementary level, it's the student activities person and the students are making a decision about the spending?
Yes, they have, each of those clubs have sponsors, and the sponsors oversee all of the expenditures.
I think Mr. Witovich may be referencing, from an elementary level, Coronado is bringing forward 25,000 and Cortina is bringing forward 20,000. Those are large amounts, obviously, to start a school year with. We understand that you want to leave some money in there. You don't want to sell yourself short. You want to have money for students and activities if you're having a welcome back ice cream party, whatever. But I think that, if I'm correct, that's his question is then at the elementary level, who's overseeing that? Because they don't, I guess the only clubs that an elementary would have would be student council.
President Reese, members of the board, even at the elementary schools, we have an advisory council that we must work with to expend these funds. The principal does not have the authority to go into a student activities account and spend those funds without the authorization of the advisory council. But what I think I hear you asking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you would like to see, and I'm just going to throw a dollar amount, anything for the elementary schools over 10,000 to see what accounts those are in, because even the high schools at the 100,000 could be split up into 20, 25 different accounts. So it may look like a lot in total, but if you get into different areas like student council, it may be 5,000. For DECA, maybe 10,000. For different football clubs, it may be 20,000. Let's take a look at those. Anything at the high school level over $5,000, I will get with the club board representative and find out what they're wanting to do with those funds and see if there's a plan. There are times at the elementary, middle, and high schools when the club may say that we're saving this amount of money for a special project. Could be a shade structure, could be turf infield, could be new water fountains or something of that nature. But let's get those specific answers for you, and let's break it down. I'm going to say at the elementary level, for any separated club account over $5,000, I'll get information for you. And at the high school level, any activity or club over $10,000, I'll get that information for you.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, and I agree. I do know that some may be multi-year campaigns if their shade structures are expensive. So if they're trying to raise money for shade structures, that may be a multi-year process, that if that can just be noted from the simple fact, no, we don't have any governance over that money, and I think all of us understand that, but we're also the ones out there where parents are like, every time I turn around, they're asking for money for one thing or another, and we understand there's different groups raising money for different things, but it's good to know, like, yeah, hey, they're going to be replacing a shade structure, or they're putting a garden, or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. And President Reese, I believe that we're in agreement that funds raised for this year, unless it's a big project, should be spent on students this year.
President Reese, I understand the reference that we have no interest in reference to where decision-making process, but I just want to remind us all that a lot of the endorsement of the products and things like that is done during school time. So that's in reference to dipping into some of our curriculum time. So that's my concern.
All right. I do have a question on 3.9. Mr. Holland, I think this is yours. It's the RFP. Can you just give us a brief explanation what this means? I get we're approving screen printing. I get that much. But with the RFP, is this saying that these are the vendors that we're saying need to be used for schools. All of our schools need to use them. The activities need to use them. They may not go outside of these approved vendors.
So President Reese, members of the board, we actually have Karen Finn tonight, who is our procurement specialist. I think I would ask Karen to be able to respond to your question, if that's okay.
So if the school's gonna do school-wide t-shirts, they go through one of these vendors. They can't go through my sister's brother-in-law's cousin. Okay. Okay. And does anyone know, oh,
So Karen, just a quick question. So yes, we've gone through this process, and we have these vendors that we've selected. But if we have a situation, if we follow the procurement process to meet those thresholds, if we have another vendor that they chose to use or choose to use, can that still not be a possibility?
okay. Two questions. One, how will this be communicated to the schools?
And if I could interrupt too, you're also the gatekeeper. So if a school did try to put something through and it wasn't an approved vendor, you're the gatekeeper to catch that.
And then are we gonna have some type of outline? And I know Mrs. Good, we kind of talked about this specific thing on what's gonna be a school purchase, what's gonna be a club purchase, what's gonna be a PTO purchase? Okay, I just don't want something that would typically be purchased through school funds to be circumvented and ran through PTO or ran through a club.
Yeah, I'll make sure that they get all the information on who was awarded and all the information on the percentages off and pricing that we did on each item. Well, not each item. We took like 5 of each of shirts and shorts and picked.
President Reese, members of the board, on some of those outside organizations, we don't have the authority on their purchasing with their school funds. If we utilize district funds, we do, but those authorities outside the direction of the district. We don't have authority on procurement rules for them, so they do not have to use our approved vendors.
Right,
We
no.
hope they do. We would like them to.
I understand that. That's why I was wondering if there's going to be some guidelines put into place, because if a school is used to using a particular vendor and they want to keep using that vendor, if they're circumventing the RFP and saying, typically we would buy this, now I want my PTO to do it because I want to use this vendor. That's why I'm just wondering if there's some guidelines in it.
We can work with our PTOs, but we don't have an authority over how they spend their funds. It's not district funds, and if they choose to buy T-shirts for the staff through their sister's vendor, then we don't have authority over that.
Okay.
And I wouldn't see any of their
Correct.
transactions in self.
Perfect. Thank you.
Madam President?
Mr. Glover?
Two items, the last two. 3.12, I just want to call your attention to. I don't know if we can pull it up on the screen or not. But so this, I talked to Ms. Good and I talked to Dr. Thomason, and I'm a little bit confused, so we're going to get some clarification. This is just the first read of this, but the policy is for student transportation in private vehicles, and so we're adding to this policy. It says each district employee, and then we've added, or governing board member authorized to use a private vehicle for district purposes shall be notified in writing that the employee's or governing board member's automobile insurance is the primary coverage and district insurance coverage is secondary. And so I just was thinking this has nothing to do with transporting students, and I'm not sure we should be, I mean, I can't think of a situation where I would ever be asked to transport students. I mean, Ms. Kaler might as a mom. But then what type of event would I need authorization from the district to drive my own vehicle? I couldn't think of an example. So we're going to get clarification of what that might be. I mean, it could be an ASBA event, but then I would need to get written authorization every time I have to go to an ASBA event, or we have breakfast with the mayor or a business leader or something like that. So what is the basis for adding governing board members, I guess, is the question that we'll get answers to in the interim between the second read, right? Okay. If you have a comment, go ahead. But maybe you have a situation I don't know about.
When I read this, the situation I thought of is when we do our school tours and we're going individually. That's kind of the scenario that came to my mind when I read this.
And I guess I would always assume that I'm driving my own car. It'd be my insurance, but we'll get clarification, I guess, as to why
I would
it's added.
assume as well.
Yeah. Well, common sense ain't always all that common, so. All right, we'll find out. Anyway, thank you, Ms. Good, for checking that for me. And then item 3.13, if we could get that pulled up. This, I'll pull it up here so I can, one sec. So it's about kindergarten, and the state finally, I think, is coming back to its senses. Years ago, just for history, for anybody that cares, all this standardized testing came about, and people were freaking out. And I watched kindergarten and the joy of kindergarten play be taken away because we had to prepare these kids for these tests, and all our lives depended on it. And so now the pendulum is starting to swing back, and we realize that unstructured play and structured play is really important in kindergarten. So it's good that this is back in there for K3, but I have to question, as we're going through this first read, there's an item number 2 in here that says the district may count a student's participation in physical education course during a school day as one of the recess periods. So I think that's a bit of a disservice to what our PE teachers do, and thinking about how often that could happen. Dr. Thompson said, like, really only maybe on like a shortened day, but we already cover it. We already have our 2 for K3 anyway. So I think it's extraneous, and really those kids they don't have PE every day anyway, so it really only apply to 1/5 of the kids, which really doesn't do us any good, and you could never really build a program around it. I don't think we need that. I think we should just give kids 2 2 unstructured play periods a day. And that's all, I guess. So I welcome anybody.
No, I agree. I read that, and then again, I thought, well, they only have PE once a week. So to try and change up an entire schedule for once a week we already do that for our early release. I don't think we want to do that anywhere else. So I agree. I don't think it's necessary. Ms. Good, I assume that it was probably put in there. That's the way it came to us.
It's just part of the legislation, and we left it in. There were some other pieces in the legislation that weren't relevant to our district, such as half-day kindergarten, and then there was this thing that says this doesn't apply to middle and high schools. Well, of course it doesn't. It's grades 1 through 5.
They really had to specify it doesn't apply to high school?
That was there. We took it out. But yeah, this business of being able to count a physical education class, it says you may, it doesn't say you have to, but that was in the legislation.
Okay, thank you.
I think that was it for me. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments regarding
Oh.
consent?
You know what? I'm so sorry.
You're okay.
This is, and Ms. Richards, I know you're back there, and I kind of putting you on the spot. So Ms. Kaler brought up something about this recess policy, and as we're thinking about recess, taking recess away from kids, I think we've all seen that. It's not terribly effective, and sometimes teachers and kids need a break from each other, but some teachers sort of abuse that, and kids that need breaks don't get them, and then things are worse. And if they didn't finish their work in class that day, is their recess being taken away? I think what this legislation is saying is we really want kids to have some recess playtime. So is there a conversation happening? What guidance do you provide to the principals and the teachers on down? I mean, I get it, if a kid's absent, I think that's a different situation, but can you just maybe talk about what you guys have talked about with that, please?
We actually talked about it yesterday in our principals meeting, and Ms. Good was there as well. And specifically, the focus is on activity and giving them that time to move around and get out there and get their energy out. We did recognize sometimes children have difficulty at recess, so we may need to keep them in to teach them the appropriate procedures out there, but we talked about taking it away to catch up on work isn't necessarily the best plan of action. So I don't know if I answered your question, but we had a pretty good Q&A yesterday.
I think it's a good thing to talk about, and revisit. Anyway, thank you.
Are you kind of referring to sitting on the wall? Okay. Are you good?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Okay.
President Reese, members of the board, just for my direction on this new policy, JL, student wellness, was it the recommendation of the board that we took out number 2, C2, or were we leaving that in? I was kind of unclear how that was left.
Well, I'm happy to leave. We could leave. I mean, we can make a motion, but I just think we should talk about it. If next time when there's a second read, we can decide whether or not to keep it or not. I mean, I get that it says may, but I think we should really shoot for the stars on this one rather than the least. But your thoughts, anybody?
Well, and I hear Mr. Glover, and then there's that other side of me is the just in case that circumstances change something, that it does give us an option, but we wouldn't practice that on a regular basis. That wouldn't be our normal protocol. We wouldn't look to utilize that clause on a typical basis, that would be, that's my thought. When I look at some policies, some things are in there for a reason, as a just in case there are different circumstances.
And President Reese, members of the board, just to be clear, it is not our practice to take away one of the recesses for PE. PE is a separate class, and students do receive at this time the 2 recesses. And if it happens to be their PE day, they will receive 2 recesses and a PE.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 3-0. All right. Then we will go on to our action and information items. We did receive our fiscal year 18 monthly governing report for July 18th, which was our closing report. Thank you, Mr. Holland. Does anyone have any questions for closing out fiscal year 18?
So President Reese, members of the board, please keep in mind that we are still in the process of closing out last fiscal year. So we will not finish paying all of our bills until the end of the month. We'll use the month of September to reconcile and clean anything up and roll any balances around October 1st.
Thank you.
So you will be getting an FY 17-18 report again. It's
Perfect.
closed.
And then on 4.2, we also received our monthly fiscal year 19 financial report for July of 18. Thank you for the comment regarding food service. Anyone have questions regarding that particular financial report?
Also, just a reminder, since I just said we hadn't rolled balances yet, you will not see a beginning balance in your 19 report.
Perfect. Like I said, I appreciated the comment because food service looks weird. All right, we'll go on to 4.3. I move that we approve the job description for a behavioral health technician. Questions or comments regarding this job description?
President Reese? President Reese, members of the board, we're bringing this job description to you because this is a higher level performance job for special education services. This is specifically tied to students with more severe and profound needs within the classroom setting. We do have a classroom that requires a behavioral technician for students to work specifically on appropriate behaviors and would have specialized training to go with this. And so this would be a paraprofessional within the self-contained special education setting that requires a higher level of professional service than we currently have.
Thank you.
Just how many do we anticipate? How many positions being open?
As of right now, we're looking at 2.
Any other questions? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 3-0. All right, this takes us to our work study, and we are going to the back of the boardroom to utilize the larger boards for our work study.